While this is an entomology course, there are other animals that can cause problems in our urban landscapes, and good landscape managers should know about them. In some cases, birds and mammals can be protected animals, or you may need a special license to manage them. In many municipalities, it is now illegal to capture raccoons and skunks and simply release them in parks or other locations without having permits and permission. In this module, we'll also cover some of the other invertebrates that can cause plant problems or folks ask questions about them. Snails and slugs are often the cause of plant damage that can be mistaken for foliage-feeding insect damage. Our first group of animals will be the gastropoda, which includes the snails and slugs. Snails and slugs are in the phylum Mollusca. Snails have an external calcareous shell that gets larger as the snail grows. Most of the terrestrial snails feed on plant tissues and fungi. Some specialize on feeding on decaying plant tissues, but others will feed on healthy plants. The brown garden snail is a relatively large species that can be found in moderate climates in North America. This is a European species that was deliberately introduced as a potential edible species. Escargot. It could be a landscape plant pest, as these snails can eat the foliage of a wide range of plants. During dry weather and during the winter, the snails withdraw into their shells and secrete a clear membrane of dried mucus that seals the shell opening. During moderate and moist conditions, the snails feed primarily at night and on rainy days. Adults lay masses of eggs in moist soil, and the young snails take a year or two to mature. There are dozens of small snails that can live in our landscapes. Most are missed and of little consequence. Glass snails have translucent shells, and the shell is more flattened down into a spiral. These usually eat soft leaf tissues of germinating plants or decaying leaves that have fallen to the ground. Most live in moist habitats, and they are most active in the spring and fall when temperatures are moderate and rainfall is more frequent. The amber snails are usually less than a half-inch in length and can occur in large numbers when environmental conditions are moist and moderately warm. These can often be a nuisance in irrigated lawns where the snails surface to feed at night on the grass blades. Walking on them can slime up bare feet and shoe bottoms. Remember that snails are mollusks, so a molluscicide is the category of pesticides used to control them. Slugs are basically snails that have lost their shells. In actuality, the shells have been reduced to a soft plate that is located under the mantle. There are more than a dozen species of slugs that are common in our urban landscapes. The gray garden slug is one of the most widespread species. It can range from a solid light gray color to a mottled brown in color. Adults range from 1 to 1.5 inches in length. This species can be active at near freezing temperatures. It lays its eggs in soil cracks and under landscape stones and timbers. The black field slug can reach 3 to 5 inches when fully grown. All these slugs feed on decaying plant materials, but they will often feed on succulent leaves. Hosta growers commonly have to deal with slugs as they grow their soft-leaved plants in shady and moist environments where they are preferred by the slugs. The leopard slug is one of our largest slug species. It is well named as the light brown body is covered with black spots. This slug feeds on a wide range of decaying plant material and has been found feeding on dog feces at night. Yuck. Most snails and slugs are hermaphroditic, which means that they contain both male and female sex organs. Sexually mature adults release chemical pheromones in their slime trails that notify other slugs that they are ready to mate. When two leopard slugs mate, the pair will climb up a wall or tree trunk. They form a thick mucus cord and drop down while intertwining their bodies. In this process, they exchange sperm and both go away being fertilized. Soon afterwards, each slug will lay a clutch of eggs in soil cavities or under landscape stones or timbers. Terrestrial flatworms used to be found only in southern states, but they are now often found in more northern locations. To many people, they look a bit like a small flat slug or unusual flat earthworm. They are neither. These are much more primitive animals that are related to the freshwater planaria. Most feed on earthworms and other soft-bodied invertebrates. The hammerhead flatworms are the most impressive species, as some can grow to more than a foot in length. These worms can reproduce by fragmentation, and they will often do so if you put one in a container. Other species are much smaller, generally being black or gray and under an inch in length. There are species of crayfish or crawdads that have a semi-terrestrial existence. These species only occur where the water table is fairly close to the soil surface. The crayfish have gills which have to be kept wet. These semi-terrestrial species can dig an extensive burrow system that has some tubes that go below the water table and other tubes that reach the soil surface. In order to build this system, the excess soil is deposited onto the soil surface in what is called chimneys. These chimneys often occur in turf that is grown over drainage ditches, near ponds or streams. In clay soils, these chimneys can harden into structures that are dangerous to mow over. In southern states, these chimneys can cover extensive areas of turf and pastures because the water table is generally high. To reproduce, these crayfish have to return to a nearby stream, pond, or lake to mate and lay eggs. The immature crayfish often spend 2 years or more as fully aquatic species before starting their soil burrowing habits. Remember that you cannot pour pesticides or other chemicals down the chimneys, as these are connected to the underground water system. Many birds forage for food in turf and around urban landscapes. Some species pick up insects, spiders, and other arthropods, while others are looking for earthworms. Starlings and other blackbirds feed primarily on caterpillars and turf, but they will also pick up little beetles, ants, millipedes, and anything else they see running about. When they persist in an area, one should have a closer look to see if there are any arthropods of concern. Sapsuckers punch a row of holes into the bark of trees, even conifers. While they can feed on the sugar-rich sap, they also eat the beetles and ants that are also attracted to the sap and are attracted in the pitch flow of conifers. Unfortunately, some of the boars will use these sapsucker holes to gain entrance into a tree. Remember that other than starlings, pigeons, and English sparrows, most birds are protected by the migratory bird treaties, and special permits are needed if management is deemed necessary. Canada geese are common urban inhabitants where there are permanent bodies of water, including small backyard ponds. This species has migratory populations and permanent resident populations. The permanent resident populations can be real nuisances, as they generally feed on grasses and defecate everywhere they forage. Nesting adults, especially the males, can be very protective of the nesting sites, with physical attacks being common. Again, these are protected birds, and permits are needed to trap, relocate, or kill them. Most management includes using sound devices or dogs trained to chase the geese away but not harm them. Urban landscapes often provide suitable habitats for a variety of rodents. Chipmunks, squirrels, and rabbits are often considered to be cute rodents and are often tolerated even when they cause plant damage. On the other hand, mice and rats are not tolerated. The common house mouse and deer mouse species are common in and around urban and suburban homes. House mice prefer to live in human buildings where they are comfortable making a living, where humans and pets are active. The deer mice generally live outside, where they feed on seeds, insects, and occasionally nibble on the plants. These will often seek moderate shelters in the fall, which includes trying to get into garages and homes. Baited snap traps and baits are often used to manage these rodents. Voles are also called meadow mice. These small rodents are a bit larger than deer mice, but they have short tails and smaller ears and eyes. Voles feed on plant seeds, leaves, and the bark of trees and shrubs during the winter months. They often chew channels in turf which can look like a burrow, but it is really on the surface of the soil. Voles often construct these tunnels in mulch and thick vegetation where birds of prey have a tough time finding them. However, under the cover of snow, voles will often extend their tunnels into the turf. When the snow melts, these tunnels can be very evident and extensive. Voles often eat the bark off of juniper ground covers, and these girdle plants will suddenly die in late spring into early summer. Folks often think that these plants have been killed by a disease or a boar, but inspection of the trunk will readily reveal that the bark has been eaten away and the tiny chew marks can be evident. I call fox squirrels urban tree rats. These mammals are rarely considered important pests in our landscapes other than they steal bird foods from bird feeders. Being rodents, these critters have to keep gnawing in order to keep their incisors honed down and sharp. They will occasionally snip off branches of trees, including conifers. They simply drop these branches to the ground for no apparent reason. In other cases, they can nibble on the bark of larger branches, and if they strip off the bark and cambium all the way around the branch, it will be girdled and die. Squirrels often make nests in attics and other building voids, and in the process they can cause considerable damage by gnawing on the wood and insulation of electrical wiring. Again, rabbits are often considered to be cute landscape animals, and many consider them to be mere nuisance pests in their vegetable gardens. During harsh winters, the rabbits can remain active below and on snow surfaces. At this time, their primary food can be the tissues and the cambium under the bark of trees and shrubs. Extensive bark removal can girdle and kill thin bark trees and shrubs during the winter months. Moles are highly modified little mammals. Their front legs are flattened and tipped with sharp claws. These short legs are attached to a robust thoracic cage. Moles usually make burrows using a breaststroke movement. The front legs are thrust forward with the help of the hind legs. The front legs are then pushed aside and then down. This pushes the front part of the body upward, which produces a raised area of soil. This process is repeated rapidly, and the moles can construct surface tunnels quite quickly. During the winter months, moles dig deeper burrows which require excavation of excess soil. This results in the typical mole hills observed in the fall and winter months. Moles use their linear surface burrows as a type of earthworm trap. When an earthworm digs into a mole burrow, it will tend to crawl one way or the other inside the protection of the dark and moist burrow. The moles regularly patrol these burrows and gobble up any hapless earthworms they find. Without a doubt, moles will feed on insects like white grubs. But when they find a high population of white grubs, they will dig side-to-side burrows that can churn up the turf. The only effective method for dealing with moles is trapping. Raccoons are rather fastidious foragers. When they find food, they will often rub it between their front paws or wipe it on the turf in a cleaning manner. When they find a large white grub population, they will often roll back the turf to expose the grubs. Raccoons will also forage for earthworms in turf. When they do this, they often mash down the turf. Raccoons readily climb trees where they will hide during the daytime. Skunks are predators that prefer insects and other invertebrates as their food. They will often forage in urban landscapes, but they rarely cause any damage to the landscape plants. Like raccoons, they will dig for white grubs in lawns and flower beds. They will also feed on earthworms after heavy rainfalls. Skunks use their teeth and snouts to dig for white grubs and earthworms. This leaves small conical pits in the turf or mulch. Over much of North America, the white-tailed deer have adapted to lives in urban landscapes. They are most problematic where residences are near parks or woodlots where the deer can hide during the daytime. At dusk and throughout the night, the deer will often forage in urban landscapes. The deer love to feed on many types of tree, shrub, and flower foliage. While this can be annoying to the homeowner and destructive to the plants, deer can cause even greater damage during the fall rut period. Males will rub their antlers in order to remove the hide coverings in September and October. Young trees and shrubs are favored for this, and the rubbing can strip off the bark of these plants. This results in major damage, even death, of those plants. Again, deer are wildlife protected by hunting laws, and special permits are needed to manage them. In neighborhoods where deer are especially problematic, fencing and using plants that are distasteful to deer are used as alternates. Over the last couple of decades, wild boars have become an increasing problem in southern and transition zones in North America. Wild boars use their snouts and teeth to churn up the soil surface in search of plant roots and invertebrates. Since these boars often travel in groups, a single clan can till up vast areas of turf and landscape beds in a single night. Most states that suffer wild boar activity have a shoot-on-sight rule, but other states consider them game animals and a permit is needed to shoot or trap them. Wild boars occur across the world where swine has been raised, so their damage can occur anywhere where insects and earthworms occur in the soil.